Miss Hayward, are you on?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Great. So I was just going to ask if you would just give us a little brief description of each of the applications that we have, our grant applications.
Yes, so for item 3, we are requesting to apply for the Department of Public Safety's body worn camera grant.
Miss Hayward, are you on?
Oops, sorry, I actually have it up on YouTube as well. Um, so if awarded our full request, the grant would reimburse the IT department for $441,450 that was spent on body worn camera storage this past January. And we would also like to apply for the 2025 supplemental allocation to the Victim of Crime Act grant that is administered through the Attorney General's office. This is a continuation grant that we apply for annually, and it funds our elder victim advocate that's in our family violence unit. We're requesting $84,154 for salary, fringe, and training, and the grant requires a 25% match. The funding for this grant, however, has decreased year after year. And so if it's not funded through the grant this year, we would like to submit this as a FY25 budget request in December. And our last request is to apply for the Duke Energy Emergency Preparedness Grant. We're requesting $20,000 for a multiple event response trailer to allow for easy setup of flood signage. We have requested this item through emergency management's budget a few times, and we applied for the grant last year, but our proposal was not accepted. And if the trailer costs a little bit more than what the grant allows for, so the overage of $1,600 would be coming from our general fund.
Thank you, Ms. Hayward. Any questions on those grants, those applications? All right, we have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Those pass. Thank you so much, Ms. Hayward. Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
All right, next on our agenda is a discussion regarding unhoused individuals in West Ashley. And this has kind of come up recently, as many of you know, that we've had an increase in some concern in the West Ashley area with unhoused individuals and groups of unhoused people in certain areas of West Ashley. So I wanted to start off, if I could, by calling on Gianna Shaw, if you would, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Councilmember Shealy, for providing us the opportunity to be here. Latasha Jenkins Flood, who heads our Hope Center. One of the things I shared with Councilmember Shealy, council supported us setting this up approximately 2 years ago. June 2022 is when we established the Hope Center under the city of Charleston. What you may not know is previously we'd attempted a partnership with 2 different nonprofit organizations. We've garnered a level of success with the city of Charleston, literally hiring a team of individuals that do both outreach and provide a day resource center where we could help meet the need of some of our unsheltered and homeless persons in our community. And part of what our outreach team does, and I'm going to ask Latasha to come up and just share briefly with the committee what the Hope Center does over at 529 Median Street. But we have actually 2 staff members that do outreach. And more recently, we were successful in securing a peer support specialist as we partnered with the police department on a grant that survives for 3 years. And part of their role and their efforts on a daily basis is to go out and interact with those that are unsheltered, both on the peninsula, West Ashley, James Island, wherever they think our unsheltered persons might be, they go out. And the goal there is attempt to build rapport. Sometimes, as you all may imagine, it's not that simple, but the police department partners with our outreach team when it is necessary to go out and interact with those individuals. And typically we are referring them to agencies and/or to the Hope Center, trying to get them off of the streets so that they can hopefully transition into housing. But oftentimes there are other services that are needed. And Latasha, I know you provided a printed document, but would you come and share with the committee what you all do and see on a daily basis? As Latasha comes, I will share with the committee that her and the team out there, I think we have approximately 8 staff members there now. We have a social worker and a half. We have a licensed substance abuse counselor as well. That came again under the SCORF grant, which several of the departments within the city of Charleston have the opportunity to secure funding from. But again, all around making sure we have a comprehensive and holistic approach to address this issue, because it literally takes all of those elements in order to deal with what is a very difficult challenge. Latasha.
Thank you, Gianna. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Latasha Jenkins Flood, and I'm the Executive Director of the Hope Center. The Hope Center is a homeless day resource center located in downtown Charleston. We opened our doors to the public on June 6th of 2022, and to date, we've served over 2,000 clients. The Hope Center is not your traditional homeless day resource center. In fact, we look at ourselves as a triage. We assist clients who come to the Hope Center who are in dire straits. They could have moved to Charleston and their whole life fell apart. They could have recently lost their job or been a victim of sex trafficking or have some unaddressed mental health issue that has allowed them to not be able to become housed. And we provide the primary needs that those clients need, because we believe that clients have the right to dignity, which means clean clothes, a safe space to sit down and meet with a case manager, some assistance with deciding where you would like your life to go, and getting the help from our neighboring partners and other agencies who provide those services. I don't want to take a whole lot of time, but I have provided a list of the services that we currently provide at the center, as well as some other rights that the unhoused have in our community. And I just want to give everyone an opportunity to review it and ask me any questions at this time regarding the one-pager.
Any questions? I guess I have a question for you. So when we have unhoused people, maybe a group of them on a piece of property in West Ashley, how are we getting the word, I guess, to people that need help that are in West Ashley, that the Hope Center is available and what's available to them? How are we getting that word to them?
Awesome. That's a great question. So one of the first things we did, Councilman Shealy, is once the center became open, I personally met with the library that's located West Ashley. I know that a lot of the unhoused individuals frequent the libraries just to read and get out of the elements, and also to seek assistance with help. We provided them with resources, pamphlets, and some small items that the unhoused may need. We also have an outreach team that goes to the sites West Ashley at different locations at designated times in order to engage those clients. Sometimes, depending on who the client is and what kind of mental health issues they may have had, or where they may be on a Maslow hierarchy of need, they may or may not accept the service the first time. It may take us like several opportunities to go out and continue to engage those persons. And if they say, yes, I'm finally ready, we will provide them with the bus pass to come to the center, and we will begin that case management in-house.
Okay. So if they say no, if you have somebody that doesn't accept what you're offering, what happens with that person? Are they just there? We just leave them there until they decide they want help? Or?
No. So clients have a right to self-consent, which means clients have the right to tell us as a citizen, I want to accept your help or I don't. However, we intend to re-engage those clients. So we say, okay, well, hey, if you're not ready to come to the center, what are your most imminent needs at the moment. If they say, hey, I'm hungry, or I need something to drink, or can you help me get an ID, or can you help me go to Social Security so I can get a replacement Social Security card? We provide those services on the spot. Sometimes if the person says, I have mental health issues, but I don't feel comfortable going to DMH by ourselves, we will contact our representatives at DMH, revisit that person, and engage that person on the spot in order to get them reconnected back to mental health, back to medicine. If they say, hey, I'm not from Charleston, I'm from New York, my family is willing to take me, but I don't have a way to get back home, we will find the funds to get a bus ticket to get them back to their respective areas. It really depends on what it is that that person needs, but we do our best to engage and provide the services. Sure.
And I will just add to specifically what I believe you're asking, Councilmember Shealy. If our unshelter in a public right of way where they're not supposed to be, we advise them that they should not be there. We give them a certain period of time to move themselves away, and they can either access the services that are provided to the Hope Center or through other partners. Sometimes they do, as Latasha indicated, sometimes they do not. And if not, we put a notice up, and we work closely with police to post that notice somewhere saying you cannot be in this space. And so you will have to relocate, you will have to move. If they are on private property, police cannot go and say, you need to move off this property. We have to call that property owner and say, you need to post no trespassing signs on your property. And then we can approach those if they're loitering on your property, if they're staying unwelcomed on your property, then police have the right to go on and say, okay, sir, you will have to relocate because the person that owns this site does not want you on the site. So there are legal ramifications and remedies that are in place. We even try before it gets to that to have our outreach team say, let us help you get from this spot. We have several now in West Ashley because they can hide better West Ashley than they can on the peninsula. And so that's why you've probably seen them there more. But the outreach team on a weekly basis are out there. Sometimes they move from one spot and they move to another spot. But that's where the outreach team is effective and actually reaching out to them. Chief Walker's team has been amazing because they also go out independently and with our outreach team members. And oftentimes that's the convincing that a person might need to make a change in either coming to the Hope Center or finding help elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman, go ahead.
What are the hours of the Hope Center?
The Hope Center is open Monday through Wednesday from 8 until 4 o'clock. We're the only resource center on the peninsula that provides the unhoused with a hot breakfast every day. We're closed Thursday to the public for administrative tasks because we have to have a day to get work done. But we do meet with clients on an emergency basis. And on Friday, we open from 9 to 12. And again, if someone calls in an emergency, we can assist that client on a case-by-case basis.
So Gianna, and thank you. So the private property issue brings up an interesting question in that so we have the prohibition of camping, as I see here, or South Carolina does, on public property. But is that something that could be addressed through a zoning change on private property in terms of like not allowing camping within a certain zoning table of uses? It's because like you're gonna go camp outside in the backyard with your kids. I think most of us don't want to ban that. But if there was some type of long-term encampment on private property, is that not something we could address through
Yeah.
zoning change?
So I won't speak to the legal side of it. That's for others, but we have been looking into this in terms of what other cities have been doing. Because it's a growing issue, not just here in Charleston, but in multiple other cities. And we got some interesting insight when went up to the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So if I may, part of this discussion, we are very much in the infancy of this, so I want to give a full disclaimer on that. But we've had meetings with the chief, and we've had meetings albeit preliminarily with the Hope Center and with Gianna's office to talk through different options. And What Columbia is doing is one that I looked at about a year ago, and I think it's pretty interesting. I'm not saying it's a perfect fit for here, but it is a pretty interesting model in that if you are unhoused, in essence, I don't know if it's an ordinance or what, I don't know the legal side of it, but bottom line is you can't sleep outside. It's considered inhumane to sleep outside. And so they are approached by either, in this case, it would be the Hope Center folks or the police department or some combination thereof. And you have 4 different options. You can go to the Hope Center if you have an addiction issue or you have something that 180 wouldn't take, right? That also provides wraparound services. Or you can be arrested if you're doing something illegal, or you're provided a bus ticket to your support network, like as Gianna mentioned. So it's those 4 options, but bottom line is you can't sleep outside. What we don't have in Charleston, and I think is ultimately the goal of the Hope Center, is to have some form of shelter there for the folks that won't be accepted into 180 place, right? And what Columbia has done is provide, at least on an interim basis, what's called a rapid shelter, which are modules that people can stay in for up to 90 days. There's some security, there's some structure to it. All of the wraparound services that the Hope Center provides are there on steroids. Same thing that could be done at 180. So I think it's an interesting model. I believe y'all are going up there, or Gianna, maybe we're talking about going up there in the next month or so to tour it. But again, I think we need to be pretty proactive in figuring out solutions here, because the Hope Center is currently contemplated, can't provide those overnight services. There's a goal and an objective to build a permanent structure. Right now, that is not fully funded. And we're not sure when it may be funded. And so does it make sense to do an interim step it would be less expensive, of course, but test the theory and try it here locally? So that's the initiative that we've been working on, and I'm happy to talk through those ideas or get perspective.
That's what I was just going to ask, because I've worked in human services nonprofits most of my career, including at Salvation Army, which used to have a homeless shelter on Dorchester Road. But it's obviously shelters are expensive to operate because they're 24/7 operations for the most part. But in conversations with other council members, rapid rehousing is one of the things that we're missing as part of kind of the puzzle to move people from. And when you look at some of the stats, especially among not only the unhoused, but if you look at those that are teetering on the brink in terms of the unbanked, they're within $500 of a medical emergency that would cause them to lose their shelter. And that could be a rapid rehousing type thing, could allow for stabilization and then moving them into kind of the pipeline, as I like to kind of describe it, in a good way, in terms of get stabilized, receive services. You can bring in other nonprofits that kind of specialize in this area of human services. But then there's kind of a goal, right, that they would be able to learn about the resources to qualify for affordable, attainable, or workforce housing that the city operates. And then they get to build up a little bit of the equity in terms of how the agreements work and everything. But they could move up into a much more stable situation. And then we wouldn't have recidivism in terms of a cycle where people are constantly losing housing and having to move through the system. And so the rapid rehousing thing, and I'm very happy to hear that, was something that I had talked about with a few other people and is definitely missing. But also, some of the things that the community's been bringing to me is kind of twofold. There's not a lot of shelter for women. Some of them are for males only. But also working in the animal welfare space now, a lot of them don't take pets or companion animals. And then that creates another significant community issue as well. And so it may seem like it's kind of a localized problem, but there's ripple effects when you kind of drop that rock into the pond that continue to move out. So I want to thank you, Councilmember Shealy and Chairman Shealy, for bringing this on the agenda, because I think there's no quick fix. If there was, we wouldn't be talking about some of the larger cities that have been experiencing this for generations, including generational homelessness. But I think that, you know, one of the things we're seeing is the move into West Ashley in a lot of instances is kind of the unintended consequence of some decisions that have been made in this room as well, in terms of policies and development priorities and that type of thing that have kind of moved people in terms of housing becoming more expensive, not being able to maintain their homes, that type of thing. And you're seeing some of the effects of the unintended consequences as well. But I think that I don't think government should provide all services. I think, you know, there's nonprofits and stuff that can help in this, but you know, sometimes the government has to lead the way and provide this missing link that the nonprofit sector or the private sector is not getting into. So I'm very heartened to hear that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Excuse me.
Councilmember Shealy.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. Mitchell has his hand up.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Oh, yes, thank you. Talking about the homelessness, that's a big problem. And I'm thinking some of you remember even Tent City, when we had Tent City here. And we worked 100% with that, trying to get them off of the peninsula, working with them, and even working with the housing authority to try to find who was unhoused. And a lot of those individuals receive checks every month. And some of those, we got them into public housing. They don't want to stay. A lot of the people you find homelessness, they do not want to stay in the permanent housing. For some reason, I don't know. I can't explain it. But for the past 33 years, when I was working as a HUD certified housing counselor, I worked with them a lot. And even worked with 180 Place. We had shelters for women at one time, but these shelters are more, you know, like say, expensive to stay. You had shelters for women and family. And those shelters closed up also because of a funding mechanism, because some of us received funding from the United Way when I was working up there. And things have changed. They changed it. And a lot of these shelters closed up. Even when I went to Nashville, Tennessee, if you want to see the homelessness there's a lot of homeless people there. Even in Washington, D.C., even in Atlanta, homelessness is all over the place. And I mean, there are larger cities than we have, and I think they have more resources and money than we have here in Charleston. But when they're getting back to the homelessness on private property, we brought that up years ago right here on council and trying to get that. But once they say they're on private properties and the owner give them permission to stay there, the police officers go there and say, you can't stay there. And they said, no, we got permission from the owners to be there. There's nothing we can do. We tried through the state and everything. It did not work. So all these things I know we are talking about now, we have tried it, maybe going back again and try it again. It might work, but we had tried this a long time ago working with this, the homeless population. Even when you see sometimes on the highway on the September clock, when you see people standing out there, we put ordinance that you're not supposed to be standing there because you can cause a wreck, you can cause someone to get hurt there, and they're still out there doing it. You see, so it's a lot of moving parts in this that it's bigger than we're talking about seeing it here. It's a very, very large problem that we're going to deal with. I haven't found a mechanism too hard to change it. And like I said, I worked with it for 33 years plus with the homelessness, but I haven't seen a way to resolve it, if you may, because some people do not want to go into permanent housing. So what you're going to do with those individuals? When you find a place for them, they get in there. Even you had these different places like 180 Place and other places giving them training how to take care of house once they receive an apartment. All this has to be done, and they still don't want to stay in it. So I don't know. We have to try some things, but I don't know what how we're going to solve it. That's just my take on it.
Thank you, Councilman Mitchell. Michelle Johnson.
So I want to add a few things. One, I wanted to remind the committee of council that you all supported 180 Place with bond funds to build housing not far from the shelter. So they are building 70 units. It took a little bit of time, but they are finally about to go to closing, and they have gone through the entitlement process of the city of Charleston. So before the year is out, we should see those 70 units going up, and that's specifically for this population. In addition to that, and this entity will present to the City Committee of City Council tomorrow afternoon, Neighbors Together, we learned of a policy that was being implemented in Tennessee. Lizzie Goddard, who was the person that led that effort in Tennessee, was with us last year. And basically, it's an incentive package to ask landlords to set aside a certain number of units for the unsheltered. The package includes ensuring that if their unit is damaged, that the funding would help with doing that. The city has set aside funding specifically to help with the rent itself, but Neighbors Together, working with the county, has received a limited amount of funds to help with this incentive package for landlords. Her goal is to stand this up in the next 60 to 90 days. And so we're hopeful that that initiative as well, and as you all could imagine, there are a number of strategies that we have to deploy to attack it. But again, those things are being done in order to address this issue head on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you mentioned the county, and maybe this is a question for the sheriff, but I know some of these areas in West Ashley, you've got some properties in the county, some properties in the city. But I mean, do we have any coordination of services or anything with the county? That's the what. Well,
Chief Walker.
Anyone who has the answer to the question.
Okay, Mr. Riccio.
I would say the answer would be not enough.
Okay, well.
We do have a relationship to a point. We do coordinate with the county. They coordinate with us. As far as response to these locations, yes, there's a lot on private property. That's where we come in. You may not realize this. We do have an internal advisory committee that we meet monthly with Gianna's folks, the police department, sanitation, even the parks, because a lot of these issues are kind of brushing into the park. So I reach out to Carter at the county. He reaches out to me, but that's about the extent of it. But it seems to work in the meantime.
But in terms of the next step, specifically services, is there? I just feel like if we're not duplicating services for the general metropolitan area, I mean, is there? I mean, this might not be a question for you, Mr. Riccio, but I mean, specific. Does the county offer services that we can pair up with, or?
They do not currently, Councilmember Tinkler. I put in an email not long ago to Christine Durant, who's the Deputy County Administrator, to say, Christine, we need help. Because in my opinion, we need more outreach workers in the field. I think 180 maybe has 3 or 5 folks now. And quite honestly, we hardly had any before. And the successes some of the other larger communities are seeing is through their outreach teams. Kind of staying in the faces, if you will, ensuring that these folks are well educated on what's available to them. And I think that's one of the strategies that we've yet to explore fully. City of North Charleston now has one. And so again, I think if the individuals that are on the street are not understanding what's available and are not being challenged to do it differently, it's difficult to see a change. So we are asking the county to maybe look at things differently. When the issue has arisen and our police officers can't deal with that particular property because it's outside of our jurisdiction, we've simply called the county and said, there's an issue here, can you get it addressed? And they'll come and address it. But at this point, they don't have a full strategy or team that addresses it. Thank you.
To that point, though, Councilman Tinkler, this is a perfect case of the unhoused are not paying attention to municipal boundaries, county boundaries. They don't care. So, no, only because I think, I would say it's incumbent on the city of Charleston to come up with a regional plan and start it here in something that they can tie on to, because it's, as mentioned, we have more, we're better set up right now. We're dealing with it more on a day in, day out basis. It's not something I want to, by any stretch, recommend to council that we take over. But I do think in terms of trying a wraparound policy or a broader policy to address the issue in a holistic way, I think it would make sense for us to come up with it here in this body, recommend it to council, and then have it where the county and potentially North Charleston and Mount Pleasant, for that matter, could tie into it as applicable.
Councilmember Brady? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Mayor.
The only thing, that is how, as I understand it, what's going on in Columbia is working, and it's slow, but it's working. And so I would recommend, just wrapping up on that point, because I don't want to say it as the be-all end-all program by any stretch, but I think, be it members of this committee along with staff, it would warrant, and perhaps the sheriff's office and members from other municipalities in the county and the police department, take a trip up there and look at it.
Because the reason I asked was I was just looking up for the MPOs. I mean, housing improvements is one of the things that the metropolitan planning organizations are responsible for. And if the unhoused aren't looking at municipal or the county boundaries that were drawn by the Lord's proprietors, then it's truly a metropolitan problem. But I know, I mean, here in South Carolina, especially, regionalism is kind of a bad word in a lot of ways. But one of the questions I had was, obviously funding is something that we take seriously in this room and are concerned about, because everything costs money at the end of the day. Has there been any thought from the administration or anyone else for that matter, looking at, I mean, there is an effect on tourism in some regards. Like if you go to, I was just in San Francisco over the summer, and one of the things when you talk to tourists is like, hey, homelessness is really bad there. Yeah, I had some friends who went to Portland, said the same thing, Seattle, the same thing. So we don't want to become known as, oh, you went to Charleston, like, man, they got a lot of homeless on King Street or anything like that. Has there been a thought of using accommodations or hospitality tax money to use this, because there is a tourism component to this in some regards?
Well, I think you make a good point. And just recently, as you're aware, the A-tax has been opened up for affordable housing. And, if we're really talking big picture, that is the crisis we're facing and what is leading to more and more people being unhoused, because that our affordability crisis is getting worse and worse. So without going too far down that road, I would say it absolutely needs to be viewed in that vein, with affordable housing as a strong component. And can the A-tax stretch into rapid housing? Probably. But again, that's something that is above my legal pay grade.
Anyone else? I guess I do want to ask the question. I'm not even sure who I send this to, maybe Mr. Riccio, but, or maybe Chief Walker, I'm not sure. But on these latest two properties in West Ashley, I looked up who the owners are, and I have been in touch with those owners, and they certainly have a concern right now for what's happening on their property. I know one of them has signed a form saying, I don't want these people with the city. What is our next steps for when we're at that level, I guess, and we've got a property owner that has a concern, does not want the people on their property, what is our step now, I guess, in that process?
Not speaking for the chief, but having worked with him for many years. If a property owner does not want somebody on their property, then they go through the appropriate channels, sign an affidavit of trespass and report to the police. And the police come out and they have to arrest them for trespassing, but it's based on the property owner. Unfortunately, people living in the woods on private property, there's no sanitary condition, it's really bad sanitation wise. It's their trash dump, and it really behooves the owner to rectify it as quickly as possible. Because I can show you pictures of locations to where it looks like a city dump. And it's really unhealthy to the surrounding community, but we have had very strong indications from property owners that they have to go. 9 times out of 10, they leave before we get there after the warning's given. So there's not many arrests.
Okay.
But they do tend to comply with our requests to leave the area. We try to get them to clean it up as much as possible, but then the financial burden goes back on the property owner to have it clean.
And I just piggyback on what Dan said. The biggest thing, especially for this group and the community to know, if you do have a problem, you still need to notify us. And one of the biggest things is education, because a lot of people don't know what they don't know. We'll educate them. If it's private property, we'll tell them the recourse that they have to do. If it's something that we can address from a ordinance or a legal issue, it's addressed on scene right then and there. But we have to be notified, you know, so I don't want to not validate people's concerns. And, you know, I know you get to the point where you start getting bombarded and it look like nothing's getting done. That's usually not the case. We assess every situation where we call to investigate. Both of those properties that you mentioned earlier, one is in the city, one is in the county, and I think the sheriff actually addressed that. But being able to communicate with the concerned citizens is the last part that we really have to make sure that we do.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of times the owners don't know until we
Yeah.
contact them.
Right.
So we dovetail with the police, they call me, we look up the property owner, we contact them and say, do you know you have an issue there on your property? So it's just a network of communication.
Okay. Thank you. So I appreciate everybody. Did I leave anybody out that from anyone's team that wanted to add anything? Okay. Well, I appreciate it. I know it's a complicated issue. We you know, it's bigger than public safety, obviously. There's a lot of pieces that come together. I'll recognize this gentleman right here who may want to add something. If you'll come to the mic, that would be great. Thank you.
My name is Richard Lavoy. I am part of this homeless community that everyone is speaking about. I came here today last minute. I'm running a little bit late. I just heard about this meeting last minute. And I wanted to come here. I don't represent all of the community. I represent some. And we try our best not to get in anybody's way, not to interfere with law enforcement or the city. We clean up after ourselves. We help each other. And if there's any questions or anything that you need, I hope I can answer them. And I just wanted to be here for your questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Lavoy. Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
If anybody.
No, not at this time, but thank you very much for taking the time to come down. Appreciate it. All right. So, you know, we're obviously going to take a look at what Columbia is doing in the rapid shelter, the 90 days program. I guess as a next step, we've got good news in that 180 Place is expanding and bringing on some more units. So we have some positive things going, but we certainly want to continue this as a conversation until we can you know, and it, as I said, I know it's much bigger. It may be that we need to get the involvement of some other committees too, as it's not just a public safety issue, but right now there's people that are concerned in certain neighborhoods of West Ashley, and they're hoping that we'll take some next steps to make their community safe. So, all right, if there's nothing else there, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the emergency management operations update, and I'm going to call on Chief Curry.
Good afternoon, everybody. So just a quick update on where we are with the emergency management and its move into the fire department. I distributed a one-pager, has all the bullet points that I will talk about today, but I can certainly elaborate if you would like. But the move to the fire department was communicated on Friday, which was March the 15th. So our initial plan to move forward with this initiative is that emergency management will become a division within the fire department, or has become a division in the fire department. The overall responsibility for that division will fall to our Chief Fire Marshal, Mike Gelazada. And if anybody has had any interaction with Chief Gelazada at all, you know exactly why this responsibility is going to him. He is the most detail-oriented person that I know. And I do believe that as we dive into emergency management and how we can best move that initiative forward with the city, what we need is a detail-oriented person who will prioritize the tasks that need to be done, the tasks that can be delayed. He will do that, and then he'll prioritize what is left for us. Obviously, the emergency management director has resigned from the city, so we'll move very quickly to fill that position. What we intend to do is revise the job description. We will take the term director out of the job description because that person will be functioning within the chain of command of the fire department at this point. So we'll do that very quickly. We'll advertise, and the goal will be to hire an emergency manager prior to the start of hurricane season. I know that's aggressive, but that is exactly what's needed for us. There are two people who are left in the emergency management division. One is Daniel Flessis. I'm sure everybody knows Daniel. We'll be relying very, very heavily on Daniel's expertise to help us bridge where we are to where we need to go. He is returning from Dublin or Belfast, I believe, as we speak. So we have a meeting with him later this week to establish priorities and distribute workload. It is a long St. Patrick's Day. I imagine it's a good St. Patrick's Day. But the two positions from emergency management will come into the fire department. Their job responsibilities won't fundamentally change, although their reporting structure will change. We do realize that there's a really heavy workload that emergency management needs to get done. The first couple of things that we need to focus on are these storms that have derailed us over the last couple of weeks, last couple of months. We need to get those things right. So that will be our priority initially. Obviously, we need to focus on hurricane season, but there's a whole host of other issues that we're going to need to deal with. So to help with that, we plan to transfer 2 firefighters into the emergency management division. That will be for the remainder of fiscal year 2024. And as part of the budget process for 2025, we will seek to add those positions on a permanent basis. We will return the firefighters to the operations division, and pending budget approval, we will hire specifically for emergency management specialists. In the current move from with emergency management coming to the fire department, one thing that I did request, and I'm working with Elizabeth Deek to work out the details, is I asked for another community outreach position to be allocated in the current budget year. And the reason for that is a lot of the emergency management issues that we're going to be facing as a community will require the community to change the way it thinks. It will require the community to buy into the fact that they're going to be much more proactive in aiding us with how we manage these storms. whether it's evacuating early when we say there's a need to evacuate, or whether it's adopt a drain programs and making sure we can get those things pushed through so that when we do have a flooding event, even if it's not a hurricane, we'll be better prepared as a community. But that's going to require a constant message to the community, and we want to make sure we focus on that. So we are working with Elizabeth Deek on that right now. We have an emergency operations plan with the city, but I don't believe it is as user-friendly as it needs to be. I really don't even think it's as accessible as it needs to be. So one of the first big issues that we're going to tackle as a team is a revision of the emergency operations plan. And we're going to try to make it easily understandable, even if it's changing nomenclature and going to, if we're in condition green, everything's okay. It's like the beautiful day we have outside. If there's a storm coming in over the weekend, we ramp up to condition yellow. And obviously with the stoplight, we all know the difference between green, yellow, red. We may put an orange in there so that everybody understands the escalating threat issues that we have. And then one other thing that I did request of Elizabeth Deek, and we'll have to work through the details, is that the Charleston Fire Department is a pretty complex operation, very much like the police department. And as we prepare our budgets, there's a lot of things that come at me. There's a lot of things that come at Chief Walker, and a lot of really, really good initiatives, a lot of really important initiatives get pushed off because we just can't accomplish them in a given time frame, or there are things that require our immediate attention. The example I would use is firefighters. If I need firefighters in Cainhoy, that's probably going to be the highest priority that I request of council. It doesn't mean that I don't need more resources in emergency management. So for the next several budget years, and I'm not quite sure of how many, but think maybe 3 to 5 budget years, I would like to prepare emergency management's budget within the fire department. I'd like to vet that budget with the fire department's command staff, but then I would like the budget to be considered outside the fire department so that we can properly resource that group. And then over time, we absorb them back into the fire department. This is just administratively for budgeting purposes, not reporting lines. So you fast forward to this week, emergency management is in the fire department. We had a hot wash meeting yesterday with operations departments, and Dan was in attendance, Chief Walker was in attendance, Julia was in attendance, so they can probably speak to this just as well as I can. But the intent yesterday was to do a post-mortem on the last couple of storms that we've had and just have an honest conversation about what the failure points were and what we need to do as a team to move forward. And I think the overarching message that that emerged for us is that we need to be proactive. We need to be assertive with our communication. And that seems to be the critical component that has been missing over the past actually several years. And we're going to go back to how things were done a few years ago.
Chief, for clarity, internal and external communication.
Yes, internal and external communication. What I'm focusing on right now is internal communication. We need to be very, very proactive as department directors and deputy directors to get together, whether it's in the MEOC, whether it's via a Teams call or just a conference call. And when we think the threat level has risen to the point that it requires planning and action on the part of the city, we need to go around the room. Every department has great ideas and great plans about what needs to be done. We just need to make sure that the trigger is getting pulled to initiate those plans and that we can verify that those things are taking place. Fire department would be putting high water vehicles in place. Stormwater would be putting pumps in place. Depending on what the tide level is, that would determine where those pumps are going to go. Storm drains are going to be cleaned out. The police department is working with barricades, that type of thing. Much more proactive to make sure that those things are happening. Lowering of the lake levels, that type of thing.
For clarity though, too, when you have these conversations and calls, there are going to be updated standard operating procedures that can have variables depending on the tide, depending on the specific conditions.
Yes.
But it's not, just for clarity, and I think you're saying this, that it's not, they're gonna get on a call and figure out what to do at that given moment. It's gonna be a code orange, and then with these other components, as the situation may warrant, correct?
Right. The advanced planning will lead us to say at a specific threat level, these are the actions that the city will initiate. And then the call would be to verify that those things are taking place. And if there's any information that we need to discuss at this specific moment in time that may change our approach, that would be the time to do it. But all this planning needs to and will occur ahead of time, and we'll have the documents to back up what we plan to do as a city. That'll be part of the emergency operations plan revision. Along with that is communication outside the city of Charleston and making sure that we communicate very clearly, very directly, and very proactively with citizens in Charleston to spell out the threats that we see and the actions that we need for them to take. One way to do that is, I think everybody's probably heard of reverse 911 software. So the software that the county uses at emergency management is called Everbridge, and it would theoretically give us the opportunity to geofence different parts of the city. And when we see a threat that is specific to a certain part of the city, we can proactively contact people that have registered and reside in that part of the city. Maybe it's an area of the city that we know is going to experience flooding, and we can contact them and say, you're being contacted because you need to move your vehicle to high ground. As simple as that. And then we can keep reinforcing those messages. One thing that we are tasking the existing emergency management personnel with is to compile a threat matrix, if you will. Now, I went into the conversation thinking this was a very simplistic thing. If the tide is X, then the reaction from the city is Y. If the rain is coming down at X number of inches per hour, the reaction from the city is this. It's not quite that simple. You know, if you're having a tide event and a rain event and a wind event all at the same time, those things factor in. That's where Daniel Fless's expertise is really going to come into play in the short term. But we had a meeting last week with the National Weather Service to spell out what we're looking for going ahead. It became very clear that the language we speak and the language they speak are a bit different. So what we talked about yesterday to bridge that is to contact a local meteorologist that is trusted and has a good track record and ask him to be that bridge for us. So I've got a name, I've got a number. I'll be making that call probably on my way home today. And then the last thing I would say is the overarching message is that we're going to shift to over preparing for events. And over time, we may find that we can back off that a little bit. But clearly, how we've performed over the last couple of weeks dictates that we take a more aggressive stance. And that's what you will find from emergency management and the fire department. And I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from committee members?
I'll just
Mr. Mayor.
want to say thank you to the chief for stepping up and being willing to do this. And they have been really working hard, his staff, our staff, but mainly his staff. So I just want to, publicly recognize him and say how much we appreciate all the work that you've done and look forward to the forward progress. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Are you going to do any test runs? Because I know with like any new structure, you kind of got to kick the tires a little bit. But just to make sure that wherever there's pain points or kind of gaps in the process, that there's some remediation there and shifts before obviously we get into hurricane season. Because I don't not agree that change is a good thing. But just want to make sure that especially with any new structure, there's communication challenges and that type of thing. So just want to make sure there's some trial runs ahead before we start getting phone calls from our constituents about things.
Absolutely. I would invite any of my department director cohorts to comment on this, but I think the police department just did one today. And yesterday, when we were all meeting, there was a collective agreement that what you just articulated is exactly what needs to happen so that we're prepared as a city.
Very good question. The answer is yes. One of the things we used to do several years ago, we used to have quarterly training operations. And like the chief just alluded to, we just did one today. It was internal with the police department, but this is one of the first things I suggested to the chiefs, especially with this new process. It's going to be very important. People are going to have new responsibilities, new jobs, and it's not going to be perfect. So really managing expectations, even with the training and all the preparedness, we're still going to run into things doing real life scenarios that we're going to have to work through. But yes, this is really important to us that we get it right. So, yeah.
I could add one more thing too, just to the members of this committee. Sorry, Councilman speaking, I won't hog any more time, I promise. But that being over prepared is going to come with some growing pains. So I encourage all council members to know that you're probably going to get people that are annoyed with probably early street closings or what have you. But I think it's better than the alternative. And I think we as an as a body are going to have to message that appropriately as well.
Councilman Seekings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first off, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're 100% heading in the right direction. Thank you collectively, chiefs, and particularly Chief Curia, for stepping up. As you know, there's been some around this table who've been looking for this for a long time. And I just think that in the end, this is absolutely the right thing to do. And a couple of things I underlined, and you've heard a lot tonight, over preparing. I can't speak for everybody in the city or everybody around this table, but I can tell you in District 8, you will never be criticized by an elected official or probably any single resident of District 8 for over preparing. You will never be criticized for shutting down a road and it doesn't rain. I mean, it is absolutely, I think, what our constituency in this city wants and needs in the current configuration we sit in 2024 with the challenges we have, not just with, but in particular with water management, right? I mean, that's been a challenge for us. So, and the other thing that I wrote down, and Mr. Mayor, you mentioned it, is internal versus external communication. I think the external communication part is a very big deal. I can tell you, I was at a community meeting last night and was talking about this just sort of from 50,000 feet because I didn't know all the details. Super popular. I mean, you're going to get community support. And as you think about moving forward, chiefs, and particularly Chief Curia, with the community outreach portion, I think it's really important for you all to recognize you've got a community outreach team in place right now. It's sitting right here. Believe me, the outreach in the other direction comes at us very regularly. Our ability now to go back in the direction from where it comes from and give them the news, tell them the metrics, all of the things that we're doing is invaluable. So I would encourage your teams as you're building sort of the infrastructure, the emergency management infrastructure, or just the management infrastructure, to include us. Let us know what's cooking, take some input. We'll listen to you and let us be out there in the community. Again, it's something that I think of all the initiatives that we've done from the emergency management side in my 15 years, this one is going to be received very favorably. And, you know, in its infancy of a few days already has been. So let us help where help is needed. Let us stay out of the way when we need to, but there's no such thing as over communication, over preparing, and letting people know that we take all this super seriously. And I think, by the way, we have some things that we can do on the city side, on the committee side, to give you the tools that you need to put some teeth into some of the things I think that y'all want to do, particularly from the police department side. And one that comes to mind, which seems super simple and maybe trivial, but really isn't, particularly in some parts of District 8, is this whole idea of when we have storms, people joyriding around the city and creating every single time they go down a flooded street, storm surge. I mean, we hear so much, and we've got the Army Corps of Engineers the last 6 years studying storm surge. Go to Colonial Street in a storm. I'll show you storm surge. Okay. It's every time an F-150 goes down the middle of the street after a couple of inches of rain. And so giving you the tools you need for some well-pointed, well-publicized encouragement, AKA enforcement of people who just aren't paying attention to when we're in a configuration where orange or yellow or red, there are consequences for running the stop sign, running the traffic light, right? To use the analogy. So congratulations. I think we're heading in the right direction, 100% here to help, and particularly on the communication, community outreach side of things. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Z. I have one point to
Yes, sir,
add to
Mr. Mayor.
that. And I am kind of with Julia here. We've looked into the no egg zones, which I'm a big fan of. And I am kind of curious, is there a legal ordinance that we could put in place or adopt, that this committee recommend to council that would require, 4 miles an hour speed limit if there's more than 6 inches of water? I mean, there would obviously be discretion from the police, but I mean, a real fine for doing that. Because I mean, it's costing people tens of thousands of dollars for homes that get waked or their air conditioning duct gets swamped by salt water. So actually putting something to it, just curious what the legal path forward on something like that would be.
While Ms. Copeland's coming forward, I have a suggestion about that no, I'm actually not trying to practice law at all. Just as a pragmatic side, we heard Chief Curia mention one of the things they're going to do is take software and be able to geofence the city and certain areas the other day when it rained a lot in Daniel Island, it didn't flood, but downtown it was impassable. As we geofence the city and we go to condition, whatever it is, then be able to enact ordinances that you shouldn't be where you are, and we can then ticket it. I mean, I think that's the best way to go. I don't think there's gonna be any problem doing something like that. But I mean, when we're flooded out and there's cars going 20 miles an hour down a flooded street, there's gotta be some legal infrastructure we can put in place that withstands scrutiny and will, again, be popular.
We'll look into it and get back to you.
And one thing I add, Councilman, is also resources, because right now it's really labor intensive. Each one of those areas we have to physically go and check those streets. So looking at some resources like sensors and certain things that trigger, especially from a public safety standpoint, these areas when we need to go close them off and being really early in that process and very proactive with that, just closing off certain streets would help some of those and better barricades, better resources.
And we've talked a lot about this. None of this is new news. And I can just tell you, I in particular will be happy to lend any support I can, particularly on the budgetary side of things, because this is this is a core service that we're providing right now. This is an essential core service, and not putting resources so you all can succeed would be a mistake on the part of this council. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, anyone else on this issue? Well, we've come to the end of our agenda, and I appreciate everybody being here. A lot of information, and just want to say thank you to all of our staff and everyone who participated today. A lot of great information. We're going to be better off because of this meeting as we move forward. So just want to say thank you. And if there's nothing else for the good of this committee, we stand adjourned.